George, welcome back into the back room.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with the big news that broke last
There's
night, which
news.
just a little bit. I really struggled this morning to make a list of things to talk about, but this one was just thrown at me last night,
Right.
which is ABC's indefinite suspension, or whatever the fuck that means, of late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel. So talk to me. What's going on here?
People are capitulating to a government that essentially seeks to eliminate criticism and opposition. And it's something that I had never conceived could happen in the United States. But we have a Congress that really doesn't do anything. We have people who care more about the bottom line from quarter to quarter than they do about the country. And we've seen that before with universities caving and law firms caving. And no, it's as though no one wants to personally bear the cost of fighting this administration when it comes to the fundamental right to criticize the government, to for almost anything now. It's like everybody wants somebody else to do something about it. And that's how bad things happen. That's how we it's really, really distressing. I don't even know where to begin with it. And I mean, particularly too, I think the problem too is with, corporations, large corporations that have so many business interests, and there are so many ways for the government to punish them that the cost benefit analysis, if you just look at it purely and you put your role as a CEO or put your role as as somebody who is out to profit and make money, you put all these roles ahead of your citizen, your role as citizen, and you have basically a complete failure of people to stand up for themselves. It's so fundamentally un-American. I, I I just find it incredibly distressing, and I'm almost at a loss for words,
Yeah, but what's
which is
interesting
usually not
is,
the case.
well, it's interesting because those corporations and law firms that have stood up to Trump and taken him to court, they're undefeated. The courts
Yes.
are firmly behind free speech. And in this particular case, from a legal standpoint, I mean, there's no way that had ABC stood up to the administration and this gone to court, there's no way they would have lost this case because you
That's
can't
absolutely right.
strip a broadcast license because somebody broadcasts something you don't like.
Right. The government cannot punish people for expressing their views, period.
Nor can they
And even if
coerce them.
they can't coerce them, they can't, it is the most fundamental principle of the First Amendment that you cannot be punished by the government, threatened by the government for exercising your right to express your views. Even if the views are
Hmm.
wrong, even if the views are, even if it's hate speech,
Right.
literally hate speech, the only thing that you can really come after people for is you can come after people for making threats, physical threats. You can come at people for making statements that can cause imminent harm to people, like yelling fire in a crowded movie theater when there is no fire. And you can't do it for expressing views, no matter how repugnant you may find them to be. And it's particularly worse in this circumstance because Jimmy Kimmel did not say anything that's
Right.
he said what he said was basically inarguable. You may not like it if you are a conservative. I don't call these people conservatives anymore. They're I don't know what they're fascists and authoritarians. Okay, they get really mad when you say that, and then they go out and say, "We will do X to you," which is exactly what the fascist and authoritarian regimes of history would have done. So I don't it's just a tremendous irony and a tremendous hypocrisy here.
Yeah.
I wish I were more coherent about it. I'm trying to organize my thoughts about it, and it's
I
just
mean,
so
look, after
I
the
woke up this morning. It's just so it's like everything we've said
Mhm.
that could happen if you put people in power who act in bad faith, who don't care about the Constitution, who don't care about laws, who are only concerned about their personal betterment in terms of acquiring power and wealth, and who seek only to serve a man whose only interests is promoting his own power and glory. And this is what you get. This is where
Yeah.
we are. And yet last night just felt like an inflection point. I mean, a friend of mine who's a prominent journalist um, was talking to me last night, and we've been talking for a long time about the impending crisis and the looming crisis. And this journalist, who's really a sunny, optimistic person by nature, said it's over. That it's over. If people are not willing to fight for their rights, the people who are, and these are people who are powerful.
Right.
They are powerful. I mean, Disney Disney has so much money, right? Disney has so much power. Disney Disney could easily take on the government and they would easily win, but it's not worth it, right? Get rid of this one
But
show.
is it? I mean, but isn't it
In a
worth
very
it?
short term, if you look at everything in the short term, well, we're going to have to fight to maintain our license. We're going to pay legal fees, and even if we win, we may lose. But all we got to do is get rid of this one thing. The problem is it's extremely short-sighted.
Well, it's not just
It's
one thing.
selfish.
It's this is the second thing now, and there'll be a third. There'll be a fourth. Does ABC want Donald Trump and the FCC calling them up saying, "Hey, that sitcom that aired last night at 8 o'clock, you got to next week make sure there's no lines like that in there." Like that's what's going to happen. I don't
Yes,
understand. It is short term. They
it's
don't see long
selfish.
term. They don't understand that
It's
it's just going to keep happening over and over and over
yeah,
again till they have no control over their own content.
that's
And then we're
absolutely
living in Hungary or Turkey or worse.
right. We're
Um,
basically almost there.
the thing that Kimmel about what Kimmel said is interesting to me because there were two parts to what he said. There was one that I didn't really agree with, which is the part that he said about the shooter was likely in MAGA or wasn't, or that Republicans were trying to you know change the narrative on that. And then the second thing was the joke about a true event, which was a reporter asked Trump, how are you handling your grief over Charlie Kirk? And like within 2 seconds, he starts talking about construction trucks.
Yeah,
And that's fun. I mean, if you want to laugh at Trump, that's funny. It's also real, right?
it's also
The,
real. Absolutely. Yeah.
right. But the thing that boggles my mind is the first part. Like, I don't agree with it, but I didn't agree when Trump came out immediately after the assassination of Charlie Kirk and said it was leftists. So are we holding our late night talk show hosts to a greater standard than we are the US president? I mean, that's a bizarre
Yeah,
place to
the
be in right now.
answer, right. I mean, the traditional American view is that the remedy for speech that you disagree with or that is wrong is more speech, not suppressing the speech that you don't want to hear. And again, I mean, there's no good faith on behalf of the government, right? This is not even really about Charlie Kirk. And I think that's shown. I mean, what happened to Charlie Kirk and the fact that it was caught on video is really one of the most horrible spectacles I think we've seen in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody deserves to die for their words, no matter how noxious those words
Mm-hmm.
are. But what the government is trying to do here is they're using it as a pretext. And this is a classic authoritarian move. And people going to get mad at me for saying what I'm about to say. But the most prompt example that immediately came to mind, and I've been saying this online, I said it on another podcast, is the way the Nazis took advantage of the death of a young man in 1930 whose name was Horst Wessel.
Mm-hmm.
Horst Wessel was a brown shirt. He was a young member of the SA, and the Nazis had not yet acquired power. But the Weimar Republic was a very unstable place, and there was violence on the streets, more than we have here. Thank goodness we don't have that level of violence at this point. The communists had people with arms and guns, and there were street fights, and the Nazis had their own paramilitaries, and there was, sporadic violence on the streets. And what happened with this fellow Horst Wessel is that he was killed by a couple of communists, actual card-carrying communists. And it's not clear whether the motive for the killing was political. There may have been some kind of a business dispute or a dispute about paying some woman. It's very strange. But it really doesn't matter. What Goebbels saw in that killing was a way to rally his troops. They made a martyr of this kid who really, he didn't deserve to die. He had a family. I'm sure it was horrible for his family. But he was engaging in bad stuff because he was a member of the SA, but he didn't deserve to be killed for that. And they turned him into a martyr to the point that the Nazi Party anthem through the end of World War II was the Horst Wessel song. And what these authoritarian style regimes do is they thrive on division, they thrive on creating enemies, they thrive on making people feel like they personally are being attacked by a nameless, faceless enemy, and that they are at risk, and that the only way to fight back is to engage in violence.
Mm-hmm.
And again, leaving Charlie Kirk and his history aside, I don't think he advocated violence. I think there is truth to saying that he did things the right way in the sense that he promoted discussion on college campuses. But on the other hand, having seen a lot of the clips of what he has said, there was an incredible degree of gaslighting and race baiting and all sorts of things that I find personally distasteful, and I find not constructive in the public dialogue, to say the least. But what they're doing to him now is they're lionizing him. They're making it to the point where you cannot even, they want to criticize people for even quoting him or paraphrasing him and suggesting that he was something other than this noble person who extolled free speech and free discussion and was open-minded and wonderful and loved people. And it doesn't matter how good or bad he was, except that they are creating a cultish martyrdom for him that is designed to promote more division and ultimately, I fear, more violence. And we can hear it in the language that Trump uses. We need to beat the hell out of the left. We need to punch left. And again, just as they assumed that the murderer of Charlie Kirk was a leftist. Now it's not clear exactly what he was. He was clearly, it seems like he was clearly transfixed on Kirk's attacks on trans people, and that the defendant murderer was, had a relationship with a man who was transitioning to female. And so maybe there was that personal motive there, but was it a thorough ideological thing? I don't know. But it's certainly, there is no evidence that it is some kind of a product of left-wing organization, whatever that may be. Antifa, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Democratic Party, the liberal media, I don't know. But they're creating this view that this is somehow this guy in South, this young kid who spent all his time online on Discord and who grew up in South Utah shooting a gun with MAGA parents, okay? They're portraying that somehow he was a tool of a grand conspiracy, a conspiracy that doesn't exist. And they're also using it, it's not just the martyrdom aspect of it to rally people. They're also basically asserting this, in essence, that criticism of Trump and criticism of people who support Trump is the equivalent of inciting violence against them, which is absolutely absurd, right? For example, my comparison of how Trump and Miller and others are treating the death of Kirk the way Joseph Goebbels treated the death of Horst Wessel. They're going to say, see, you're saying we're Nazis and you want to have us killed because, we had to, people had, you would want to kill Hitler and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. We haven't reached the point of violent civil war or revolution or anything like that, or a Holocaust or whatnot. What we're talking about is history and analogies and comparisons to history, which we learn in order to understand current events. History doesn't repeat itself, but as the old saying goes, it rhymes. And the exact same tactics, not just with respect to the handling of this death, the manipulation of people's emotions in the wake of this death, and then a slew of so many other things: the control of law enforcement in cities, the attacks on allies, the just continual lies, the disregard of constitutional and legal provisions, the whole program of the Trump second administration is of a piece with authoritarian takeovers in countries all over the world in the past, and even in the present, as you say, Hungary. And that's the point. The point is, what's happening here, people need to be absolutely crystal clear, not only that it is not normal, and clearly what's happening is people are getting used to the abnormal. They're getting used to, it's something that psychologists call malignant normality, where the things that are just bad, that you would have considered bad at some point in the past, become normal and accepted. It's not just that, but it's just, we have to understand the danger that this is leading us to. And I don't think enough people do that. I think they're looking at things too narrowly. I'm glad to see there's a lot of defense of free speech today, but I don't really think that people are connecting it up to the overall destruction of, essentially a civil society in a democratic republic. And that's what we're seeing here, and the abandonment of constitutionalism. And what this gets us to is we do get to a lawless state at some point. And if you want to end up in a situation where there's some kind of like a Spanish Civil War in the United States, well, we're headed down that path. And in fact, many of the people, many of the MAGA extremists you see online who have incredibly large followings, like a Tim Pool, who's been talking about civil war for a long time. They want this. People want this on the extreme right. And they are using the Kirk assassination as an attempt to get there, including people like Laura Loomer, right? Laura Loomer was critical of Charlie Kirk because she thought he wasn't, she thought he was squishy in some ways, to use the term that they like to use, that he was, soft on things. And now she's basically saying, that she deleted her, I think she deleted her tweets about that, or she certainly walked those back. And she's saying that I want Donald Trump to become the dictator that the left claims him to be. I don't claim he's a dictator yet. I claim he's getting there and wants to be one. And this is a step along the way to getting there.
But isn't it incumbent upon Democrats to start messaging this the right way, to say to those in MAGA or moderate Republicans, like, do you really want a dictator? Because this is what happens in a dictatorship. You don't get to listen to the music you want to listen to. You don't get to laugh at the comedians you want to laugh at. You don't get to watch the movies you want to watch. You don't get to read the books you want to watch, because those freedoms of choice are taken away from you, because guess why? Because the dictator makes those choices for you. And you could spread that out to your health decisions, your work decisions, every decision in your life. Take a look at China, take a look at North Korea, take a look at Hungary, take a look at Turkey and every other dictatorship. No. But how come Democrats aren't out there going, people, is this what you and your fathers and grandfathers suited up for, to die in battle over? To become a dictatorship?
Maybe, some Democrats might say this is unfair. But what I'm seeing in this country is just this weird disconnect between the people who want to point that out and fight back, and I don't mean that literally, and be careful with my words here, that they want to push back against authoritarianism. And to do that requires you to label it as such and explain it as such and put it in its context as such. But there's a disconnect between people who do that and people who are organizing in certain ways. Like I have all these friends who are bringing lawsuits that are, that have achieved some remarkable results. I don't think they're the complete answer to this, because I don't think you could have litigated, I don't think you could have enjoined the rise of fascism in Italy or Nazism in Russia, or Nazism in Germany and Putinism in Russia. But there is this weird disconnect between the political opposition, the actual party political opposition, Democrats, and the people who are doing the most to push back. And I don't understand that. That being said, I see that there are people who are saying the right things and understand what's going on here. I saw the senator from Connecticut, his name is now slipping me.
Murphy.
Murphy, yes. He did a little selfie video that he tweeted online or posted on social media, where he basically said what we are saying now, what I am saying, that this is we're marching down the road toward authoritarianism. And there are other Democratic senators who do that, or are doing it, but they're just.
How do they do it in a way that cuts through
Because they're not.
Chris Murphy tweeting to me, it's like, let's have every Democratic senator have a press conference together on the steps of the Capitol and tell the American people, we are in an emergency. Our democracy is dying. And here's why. And here's what you're going to lose. Like Chris Murphy with a tweet. What the fuck does that do?
Well, but but Chris Murphy, I'm praising Chris Murphy because at least he's saying the right things. The problem is there isn't and this is, I'm agreeing with you here because you just said more quickly than what I was about to go to, which is there's no cohesiveness to it. There is no critical mass to it. It is just that so many people, I think, in the Democratic Party just think, we'll wait for the midterms.
Right.
It's like
28, it'll be over. We'll get our guy in.
It's like you're assuming a lot here.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. Look, I think if if things proceeded in a normal course and we had free and fair elections in 2026, I think the Republicans would get plastered. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that in some of the people who are just not deciding not to run. I think we're actually seeing maybe some panic with Trump in the White House on this, because I think that's part of how frenetic they are, is because they know there's a clock running.
Right.
Okay. And they got to get all this, they got to do as much as they can to consolidate power in the next year or so. But that being said, it's like, okay, fine. We make it to, and also the redistricting, right? The redistricting in Texas, I think it's good that the Democrats are fighting back at the state level to counter that in other states. In Texas, it may end up backfiring because he's cratered. Trump and the Republicans have cratered among Hispanic voters, and the districts that have been drawn, as I understand it, I don't do the math here. I'm just listening to people who know the demographics and understand polls and understand where people are in Texas. The drawing of these districts was premised on the proposition that the Republican gains among Hispanics in 2024 would be maintained henceforth. And if it's not, I'm told, again, I don't have the computer models and I don't have the wisdom of the demographic. I don't have a demographic map of Texas in my brain or on my desk. It could actually cause the Republicans to do worse than they would have done had they not fucked around with the districts. Okay, fine.
And to your point, here's why. The new polls that came out this morning, I believe, show that Texas Republicans on the economy, Trump went from being up 9 to like down 40. I mean, he is beyond cratering. They have jumped ship. And if we believe Carville that it's the economy, stupid, which it always seems to be,
yes,
that's devastating.
It is devastating. And it's like, okay, so from there you could draw the conclusion, that's fine. Whatever he does now, we'll just wait it out and he'll get plastered and we can fix it all later. Mm-hmm. But he's not going to cooperate with that plan.
That's a small little factoid.
That's a small little factoid. And we are dealing with a man who tried to launch a coup against the Constitution of the United States in 2021. We're talking about a man who only left office because he physically had to. Okay, because he understood that he would be dragged out of the office if he stayed, because he didn't have control of the system in the way that he would have needed to do to stay in power. He wanted to have that control. He wanted to get the Justice Department to support him. He wanted to get people to support him. He wanted to get the people on Capitol Hill to basically reject the electoral votes, send them back to the states so that it wouldn't be. So Joe Biden would not have been elected president by a vote by the Electoral College on January 6, 2020. But now he's taking control, or trying to take control, of policing in individual cities, including the city of Washington, D.C. And as we've seen in any number of struggles against authoritarianism in the past, control of the military and police in a capital city is absolutely crucial. I mean, whether you think of the Chilean Air Force bombing the presidential palace in Santiago in 1970, whatever, or the Operation Valkyrie in 1944, or anything else like that. If Trump had had control of policing and physical force in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, he would have called out the National Guard, which he didn't. And guess what he would have done? He would have shut down what was going on in Capitol. Those troops would have joined the mob that he sent up there. All right? So why are we assuming that A, we're going to have free and fair elections, and B, if we have free and fair elections and the Republicans get plastered, Trump's not going to try to do something to prevent that a Democratic majority in Congress or one house or the other from taking office? Or three, even if a Democratic majority in Congress in both houses is established, what makes us think he's going to pay any attention to it instead of basically declaring them irrelevant under Article 2 of the Constitution? Right? He's not going, he's first of all, he's going to do everything in his power to prevent the turn of the House, because he knows that once you get 218 Democratic votes, he's going to get impeached. And there has been no president in our lifetime, and probably ever. I mean, you could draft a bill, a bill of impeachment that would make the length of the bill of impeachment against Andrew Johnson look like a pocket part, a little, thing you could put in your pocket. He has committed so many, I think, high crimes and misdemeanors within the meaning of the Constitution. And he's doing it every day. And it was just rampant corruption. It's the use of the military.
You know what? But you know what? And this is the problem I have with Democrats, because you are 100% right. But let's say we have a midterm, Republicans get trounced. We have a 28 election, a Democrat wins. If this was Vegas and I said, where would you put your money? On Democrats impeaching him, or going, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's be above the fray and not look in the rearview mirror, right? That's what they would probably do, especially after what we've been through. But it's that mentality that they're also demonstrating today. It's like the house is on fire, democracy's dying, but let's not actually act like the house is on fire and democracy is dying. Let's act like we're running against Ronald Reagan in 1980. That's what I see them doing. Once in a while, somebody shines through, a Cory Booker, somebody else, Bennett out in Colorado. People who have fire in the belly, people who are angry, who are saying it's going to be over soon if we don't fight. The rest of them are like, it's like Chuck Schumer with his like strongly worded letters. Like that's how we're fighting this thing.
Yeah. And I thoroughly agree with that. I mean, there's just so many individuals who have been fighting in different ways, expressing opposition to the government, among the Democrats that I like. But again, there's no cohesiveness. There is no unity. I mean, part of the problem is, we have this system in the United States where there is really no party leader for the opposition. We have legislative leaders, but there is really no party leader to the opposition until a party has a convention. The out of power party has a convention a few weeks before a presidential election. So that's part of it. And part of it is just the temperament of the Democrats. They don't have that instinct of basically, they're not, a lot of them just aren't fearless enough. And
they don't instill fear. Like at the hearing this week, when Cory Booker was questioning Kash Patel, the look on his face, it's like, you want to be like, ooh, I don't want to mess with this guy. Yet most of them, when they start talking, these senators, Blumenthal, whoever, it's like Kash Patel goes, and like that you can just blow them over. And
Right.
so, where's the
Well,
fight?
it's non-existent because A, they have the power of the federal government on their side, and B, if you ever had done that 30 years ago, where let's say you were, I don't know, let's just say you were a FBI director for Reagan or George W. Bush, and Howard Metzenbaum or whoever would have been on the Judiciary Committee back then, asked some really, really obnoxious question. Even an asshole like Howard Metzenbaum, right? And you mouthed off at him and treated Metzenbaum, who they all hate. They mostly, even the Democrats didn't like him, as I recall, right? If you had treated him with the kind of disrespect that Kash Patel was treating members of the United States Senate at the hearing this week, Republicans would have gotten upset because their view is, okay, I may not like that my senator across the aisle there, but this is a question of respect for our institution,
Right.
the Senate of the United States, the Congress of the United States. And there's none of that anymore.
Right.
And
Well,
that's,
they're all in the same cult.
they were, so we have this sort of weakness. First of all, it's basically just moral corruption on the part of Republicans. They are no longer willing to stand up for themselves. They're no longer willing to stand up for the Constitution. They're no longer willing to stand up for the institutions to which they were elected, which the framers, the Congress of the United States, the framers considered to be the most important, actually the most dangerous branch. They're completely ineffectual. Their view is we just rubber stamp what Trump says, and we can't criticize him. And no matter what disrespect somebody shows the institution to which they were elected, it doesn't matter to them. It's just, well, I mean, and these people say, why do you want? I don't understand. Why do these people want to become congressmen and senators? If there's nothing, they just want the jobs.
Right.
What is it that they would lose their jobs for? What is it that they would say, as a matter of principle, I will risk my job and I have to go back to actually work in the private sector or something, right? What is it? What is it that they will stand up for? And at this point, given where we are, the answer is clearly nothing.
Yeah. Look, I have a lot of people on this podcast who are running for Congress, running for Senate. And that's one of the questions I always ask them. It's like, why on earth would you want to wade into this cesspool? And I get a range of answers. There are still people who believe in the Constitution and our
God bless
democracy.
them.
Yeah, and they think they can make a difference.
God bless them. An example of
Yeah,
Jeff Duncan
absolutely.
in Georgia. I mean, I guess he switched parties. This
Yeah, he's
man,
amazing.
he's amazing. He's
Yeah.
doing it for the right reasons.
And
He
maybe
will
that's the answer. Maybe it's just a slow haul, but the more Jeff Duncans in this world, Mallory McMorrows, the more righteous people on both sides of the aisle, maybe we're not going to see much of a difference in a year or two, but maybe it is the thing that will save democracy. I just want to ask you, because I'm not a very biblical man, but when you think about David and Goliath, it makes you wonder that maybe not today, but ultimately, like who actually is David and who's Goliath? Is it Trump, the Goliath, or is it really we the American people, the Constitution, democracy, that ultimately is going to be the victor because it is the bigger, the stronger, the more mighty thing in this country. And that even when it looks terrible, looks bad, and we're frustrated and we're angry, we're depressed, watching what Trump does in his autocratic march, that we have to stay focused and that we are the Goliath, not him. We are.
I absolutely agree and think that that's where we want to be. But right now, everybody is kind of siloed. Everybody's like looking at someone else. whether it be the corporate chieftains who are caving to the FCC, or members, Democratic elected officials. Everybody is looking for someone else to do something. In that
But
sense,
should we take a lot of solace in the people like Jeff Duncan, who
we should, but
maybe they know something we don't, which is no, this fight is far from over, and they want to get in it. They want to get in that trench, and they want to fight,
I,
and
I,
that's very
yeah,
inspirational.
it is inspirational. But right now we don't see people being inspired the way we need them to be
Right.
inspired. Now, maybe it's
In
going to
numbers, greater
take,
numbers for sure.
right, maybe it's going to take some further crisis. I don't know what that crisis would be. Maybe it's all the Jimmy Kimmel fans in the world are going to say, what? And they're going to start fighting back. I don't know. I don't know what it is going to take. It has not happened yet. And much to my shock, um, I mean, I'm a retired lawyer. I should be just playing these guitars, right? I really would be, it really would make me happy. I don't, look, it turns out I have more fun talking and yapping and podcasts and TV than I ever thought I would, but it wasn't my intent to do that. Um, I, I thought naively in 2019, when I went off the reservation, I thought that, look, it's like, if I can do it, people are going to say, yeah, I can do that too. And because I know there were so many lawyers, conservative, libertarian type lawyers, who were concerned about the direction that things were going. Because people would come up to me at like a Federalist Society conference and say, thank you for speaking out. And I thought that's like, okay, you just have to show them that, and people will follow. And I also thought at some point people are going to say, oh, basta, this guy's too much. What is he doing? And it went the other way. I thought that's like, to me, Trump was always the nails on the chalkboard because it was offensive. The sound of him, the sound of what the substance of what he does was effectively to my ears and to my intellect like the sound. It's this intolerable scraping of the Constitution, of truth and of justice, and everything's like, I can't. Right? It
It's
made
funny
me.
you say that because recently I've said that listening to Trump is like listening to a combination of nails on a chalkboard, a
Yeah,
screaming cat in heat, and a toddler who won't stop whining. Put all that
right,
together,
right.
that's what we're having
Yeah.
to listen to
And
every
what
single day.
happened was people put on earplugs, or they got used to it, or they started going, no, 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 no. That's what they
Well, let me ask you this about something you said earlier when we were talking about the Jimmy Kimmel thing, because I think this is really the most important thing we should be looking at right now. And that is you questioned if we are now at an inflection point. We saw before the election last year that Republicans were just aghast at attacks on free speech, aghast at cancel culture. I mean, like that and Epstein are the two things that seem to drive them the most. It's the air that they breathe, the blood that runs through their veins. Now we're seeing this massive attack on free speech, all the things that supposedly they love, they fought for. That's why
They
they
love it
elected
for
him.
themselves, not for the people
But
anymore.
we're also now seeing this interesting mix of condemnation coming from people
Mm-hmm.
like Tucker Carlson
The
and
Wall Street Journal
others.
editorial pages.
Exactly. Like, is this going too far to people that we need in this country? Moderate Republicans, independents, maybe even some of MAGA. Is this the thing that makes them go, wait a second? No, no, this is not what I voted for. I wonder if you're raising something that's really
Okay,
important.
I, I wish that to be the case. I hope you're right. It would be great if it were. But I think the fundamental problem is that too many people are willing to look at things in a one-sided narcissistic way. That when my rights are violated, if my First Amendment rights are violated, if I am silenced or canceled, whatever that means. I mean, they kind of go too far that because it's not just about the government, but that's bad. So we need to do exactly to the other side what they're trying to do to me. And it's just this very narcissistic, like the rules apply to protect me and against them, but not the other way around. And that is sort of the essence of Trumpism, because it's the essence of Trump. The rules don't apply to him. The rules are to be manipulated and to apply to everyone else. So yeah, I mean, Tucker Carlson, it's like, okay, well, I'll take Tucker Carlson. And I'll take the Wall Street Journal editorial page. The Wall Street Journal editorial page actually is a thinking editorial page. They just sometimes kid themselves into thinking that Trump isn't as bad or that the Democrats are worse, but let's set that aside. But look at Brendan Carr. Okay, Brendan Carr is celebrating the fact that he was able to threaten major media outlets into changing their programming because he could threaten them with regulatory sanctions illegally, but let's set that aside. And yet I was watching television this morning and somebody played a super clip of all the times that Brendan Carr in social media or in public video statements said, you know, we have to defend free speech.
Yeah. And who else said that? Who else tweeted that and said that all the time? Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk.
Now, how do you think his fans, his followers, what are they thinking right now? And they're like, wait a second, we love that guy because of all that stuff he said, and now we're watching.
See, but you know, I mean, I'd like to think that that's how they think.
Some of them, hopefully.
Some of them might be, but they also
they don't call me optimistic Andy for nothing.
Yeah, I've been hanging around with pessimistic people like J.V. Last at the Bulwark. They view it as the other side is the enemy, a lot of them. And that trumps, so to speak, everything else in principle. And it's sort of interesting. Somebody tweeted out the other day, there was a psychologist, I think his name was Kohlberg, who basically created some kind of a hierarchy of moral development. And it first starts off with, it's all about me, 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 me. And then the second is, I'm avoiding punishment. And then it goes to, oh, I'm gonna be a good boy because people will be nice to me. It's a question of how you internalize rules to be respectful of other people. And it takes a few steps to get to the top where you've matured enough emotionally and psychologically and intellectually that you act on principle. And principle meaning what applies to them applies to you. And that's ultimately an expression of empathy, because you have to understand that what happens to that other person could happen to you. So you want to live, I mean, you know, it's kind of like Rawls. You want to know the system that's best is the one that if you were born as the least fortunate person, you'd be okay with the system. It's this, people don't think that way. Too many people don't think that way. We have lost the capacity, many of us, particularly young people who, you know, I mean, who are lesser educated, to think of principles in the abstract and how they can be applied to different people in different contexts fairly. And that's critical when it comes to free speech. I protect Charlie Kirk's right to be a race baiter because I don't want Donald Trump to be able to suppress my speech.
Right. It's
but
really simple,
that requires a level of moral and intellectual thinking that not enough people in this country have anymore.
Well, that's the key right there. I always say that, given how our elections these days are won and lost on the margins, we only need a few people to recognize what you just said. And then the game changes.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, and that's also a point. It's like Yeah, that's actually a very, very important point. But again, I mean, bad things have happened in other societies where the bad people didn't have a majority. The Nazis never achieved an
Right.
electoral majority. Two
Right.
elections, the second election they had after they took power, the election was an election where they took power. They had, I don't know, 35, 40% of the vote. And, Hitler was asked to form a government. There was an election a few months after that. They did worse, but it didn't matter. They outlawed the opposition.
Yeah. George,
And
always a
people,
pleasure.
all
Always
right,
insightful. Come back again soon.
always. Thank you.
Take care.